Ever since a beautiful female employee transferred to my husband's workplace, our married life changed drastically. He started talking only about the beautiful female employee and began making sarcastic remarks to me almost every day, telling me to become more beautiful like that employee. Reaching my limit, I confronted him with divorce after learning a certain secret about him. But he, unaware of everything, seems to think we can reconcile. What was the secret he was hiding? How will I handle him and the beautiful female employee? He justified his behavior with, "It's just work," but faced consequences after his major secret was revealed. As a result of various troubles caused by him, I successfully divorced him. I can't believe my husband would do such a thing. It's shocking to see wives who are surprised or in shock, right? I'm stunned by my husband's antics. I'm glad I could divorce him quickly. What did my husband do? I guess there are things you just don't notice before marriage, huh? It's surprising how little you realize. Adam and I met through work connections, but to be honest, it was just that I had a colleague who knew someone at my husband's workplace, and we all ended up going on a group date. Because we were the same age, we quickly got along and dated for about 2 years before getting married. I think we got along well for the next 3 years. But when I turned 31, a beautiful employee named Brittany transferred to my husband's workplace. Since then, my husband's attitude completely changed. I'm neither beautiful nor cute. Yet my husband would say, "Natalie, you're cute, you know." He used to say things like that, but then suddenly he started giving me the cold shoulder. "Huh, if you, Natalie, had the same face and figure as Brittany?" He actually said that. I naturally complained because I felt uncomfortable with that. Don't you think it's rude to say such things? But you know, women and men have different sensibilities. I think women should always be beautiful for men. Besides, Brittany is very efficient. I wish even you, Natalie, could learn from her. Is that so? Well then why don't you just get along with Brittany? That's right. I'll bring Brittany over next time. And then I think it would be good if you studied Brittany and got closer to her. My anger was about to explode, but I really hate it when the atmosphere in the house gets bad. That day I hammered it into my husband that if he did anything further, I would divorce him and went to bed. Maybe my husband regretted it too, but he didn't bring up Brittany anymore. He's the worst husband ever. We had a big fight. I'm surprised I put up with it. I thought fighting would get us nowhere, so I planned to talk about Brittany once we'd both calmed it down. My husband was raving about how wonderful Brittany was, and I was feeling really frustrated with him. But soon after that, my husband started inviting colleagues over to the house. That day, I had to work an extra hour because things were busy. Just when I thought I could finally go home after finishing work, my husband called me. "I'm bringing some colleagues over tonight, so make sure to cook something. Something like they serve at a tapas bar. And don't forget to prepare some drinks too." What? I'm just about to leave work now. Why? You're usually home by now. I had to work overtime. You should have told me earlier if you were bringing people over. And if you want to entertain them, you should do it. They're your guests. That's a wife's job. That's why I say you're not as considerate as Brittany. Hurry up and get home to prepare. My husband spoke in a strong tone, and he immediately hung up the phone. I still wanted to complain to my husband, but that just irritated me. I rushed home to find my husband and 6 of his colleagues already inside, eating chips and drinking beer. Most of them were his subordinates, with 2 colleagues at his level. They greeted me politely, and I returned the greetings as his wife. But then my husband. "You're late. Hurry up and cook." Annoyed but without a choice, I went to the kitchen. Glancing back, I saw a woman sitting very close to my husband. She was exceptionally beautiful, and I figured she must be Brittany. She seemed to be around the same age as my husband and me, and gave off the impression of being very confident in her appearance. She seemed to be very close to my husband, but I was too busy at the time to address it. Furthermore, Brittany made sure I could hear her say, "Adam, your wife always troubles you, doesn't she? How sad." When I heard that, I became extremely irritated. I thought about making Brittany's beer the only non-alcoholic beer, but I didn't know what my husband would say later, so I decided not to play that prank. But at that moment, one of my colleagues, a woman in her early 20s named Michelle, spoke up to Brittany. "Isn't it rude to say such things? I don't think it's appropriate." I admired how clearly she spoke up to a senior colleague despite being young. Brittany was smiling, but her smile seemed forced. Then my husband immediately countered Michelle.
Michelle, you're quite assertive for someone so young, but behaving like that will only worsen your standing in the company, you know. I don't care about such things. However, if it becomes clear that my supervisor is trying to undermine my position, I will report it to the company's HR, okay?
Michelle was known for her stance of not flattering even her superiors, and those around her would often say, "Let's handle things more gently." When I was in my early 20s, I couldn't have shown such an attitude towards my superiors. I was surprised. Is this a generation gap? But Michelle is very polite. She helped with cooking and washing dishes afterward. She goes around pouring drinks for her senior colleagues, and seeing that side of her makes her seem like a responsible person. And she helped with the final dishes before leaving, but I can't help but notice the things that her supervisor and Brittany say and do.
I never imagined they would be this harsh, even at home. If it gets worse than this, please let me know. I can introduce you to a lawyer.
And with that, Michelle gave me her business card. However, it's not the card she uses at her company, but a business card for her hobby of drawing illustrations. I like anime and manga, and I follow my favorite illustrators on social media. I was impressed by the beautiful design of the business card.
Also, Natalie, there's something I'd like to tell you.
And then Michelle told me something I couldn't believe. I made up my mind about my husband at that point. Michelle is cool, but she seems difficult to handle at work, huh? But for me, Michelle's presence is appreciated. With my husband and Brittany acting sketchy, having more allies is better. And then my husband started bringing colleagues home frequently, which increased my burden. Brittany always came along, and the two of them would exchange sarcastic remarks, prompting other colleagues to intervene. But it's impossible for everyone to be invited to our house every time. Gradually, my husband began bringing only Brittany back home. Maybe people couldn't keep up with them. The house became my husband and Brittany's domain. After my husband gave me orders, Brittany smirked and said, "If you keep pushing Natalie around like that, it's really pitiful, you know." And then my husband laughs along with her.
If I don't do that much, Natalie won't grow. I wish Natalie could act without having to say anything like you, Brittany. But she's just too laid back.
And then he makes a remark that puts me down. But I'm not just someone who listens to being told what to do all the time. After 2 weeks of Brittany coming to our house, I had already made a decision. So when he brought Brittany home, I told my husband what I was thinking. "Adam, you told me to become like Brittany, but that's impossible for me. After all, she frequently visits other people's homes and inconveniences the boss's wife. I don't want to become that kind of person." When I said that, Brittany glared at me, unable to argue back. However, my husband promptly defended Brittany.
Brittany will eventually replace me once I get promoted. Deepening this kind of trust is only natural. This is also part of the job.
Well, it was predictable that my husband would defend Brittany. I immediately handed my husband a divorce form that I had already filled out. It's fine to get along well, but if you want to deepen trust, do it at work, okay? I can't take it anymore, so let's get divorced. Please sign the divorce papers. My husband looked at me in disbelief.
Huh? You must be kidding, right? There's absolutely nothing between me and Brittany that would warrant a divorce.
Is that so? Then why are you two so close? I glared at my husband and Brittany. Brittany was clinging to my husband's side as if they were enjoying drinks together at a girls' night out. In response to my comment, my husband hurriedly distanced himself from Brittany, but it was already too late.
No, I just wanted you to become a woman like Brittany. I only thought that a little jealousy might make you put in some effort, and Brittany was just helping me out.
What? You're going to marry me once you divorce your wife, right?
What are you talking about? It's fine if you like me one-sidedly, but please don't say things that could ruin my marriage.
That's terrible. I trusted you, Adam. Seeing them start such a conversation, I took the opportunity to quietly remove the keys from my husband's pocket. Upon seeing that, my husband said,
Natalie, I'm sorry. I love you, Natalie. I apologize for making you feel uncomfortable, so please forgive me just this once.
I ignored his words and threw my husband and Brittany's bag out the front door. They hurriedly tried to retrieve them. As soon as they were outside, I locked the front door and put on the chain lock. My husband kept ringing the chime, so I turned the volume on the intercom to 0, and soon a call came in from him.
Listen to me. I only have you.
Ignoring whatever my husband was saying, I conveyed something I had forgotten to mention. Oh, right, I forgot to mention. You and Brittany might not have a place at the company after a while, too.
Is that because you will gossip about our affair and ruin our reputations?
Who knows? Also, no matter how much YouTube might struggle financially, I'll still be expecting alimony payments, so make sure to pay up. With that said, I hung up the phone and turned it off. The next morning, it seemed like my call history would be quite impressive. My husband was apparently kicked out with just his work bag. It's too pathetic. Surprisingly, my husband doesn't waste his time on useless things. Once he realized I wasn't answering the phone, he didn't bother calling anymore. Instead, I received multiple messages denying any infidelity, but I didn't even read them. After that, it seems my husband started living with Brittany. At that point, I could probably claim alimony for the affair. But when night fell, my husband returned to the house banging on the door.
Natalie, open up. I only need you, Natalie.
He was so noisy and disruptive. Our apartment is designed so that noise from neighboring rooms doesn't carry, but making a ruckus in shared spaces is just too much. Finally, I had to threaten to call the police if he didn't stop bothering me. Upon hearing that, my husband left reluctantly. Calling the police wouldn't have helped because it's a marital issue they can't intervene in, but my husband seemed particularly averse to dealing with the police lately. When he saw police officers outside, he quickly hid his face and hurried away, which made me wonder what he was up to. It all seems so suspicious. What on earth is my husband up to? So he had walked away from in front of the room once, but the next day, it was as if he had completely forgotten about the previous day.
Open the door.
He started making a scene outside the room, so reluctantly I decided to go back to my parents' house for a while. My parents were also worried and expressed critical opinions about my husband. But when my husband realized I hadn't returned to the apartment, he started coming to my parents' house with his mother. My father handled the situation, saying things like,
This affair won't be tolerated. Please respect Natalie.
And he protested vehemently. At first, my father had a strong attitude, but gradually he began to look tired, which made me worried. Above all, I didn't want my parents to suffer because of my husband. So I called Michelle. Michelle and I were friends on social media, surprisingly getting along well. When I explained the situation, she suggested,
Why don't we try living together temporarily?
I jumped at the idea. Even though we were friendly on social media, I worried about discovering each other's flaws when living together. I'm laid back, while Michelle is assertive, right? I'm concerned about how we'll get along.
Don't worry. We'll establish clear rules for living together and stick to them.
Michelle had previously shared an apartment with a friend who moved out after getting married. She said having me would help with rent, which was a relief for me because I preferred lower rent. Since my workplace was far from my parents' home, I had planned to move out eventually. Michelle's apartment was closer to my workplace than the apartment where my husband and I had lived, which seemed perfect. Michelle is generally quiet, always drawing illustrations in her room, so we rarely argued. Despite being nearly 10 years younger than me, she is calm and self-assured. We quickly became friends, often discussing illustrations and subculture topics, especially when she posted her art on social media and I would react promptly. Initially, we had a rule of preparing our own meals without interfering, but soon it became natural for us to shop and eat together. I was enjoying living with Michelle, but one evening after work, as we coincidentally returned home together, we stopped at a convenience store. How about some beer when we get home?
Sounds good. Let's get some snacks too.
That's when it happened at the convenience store. When you say incident at the convenience store, do you mean a robbery or a car crashing into it? No, I ran into my husband and Brittany there. And when my husband saw me, he came running over.
Natalie, help me.
He started causing a real disturbance, which was really annoying. Brittany was also sobbing uncontrollably, and I couldn't believe what was happening. At that moment, Michelle said,
So, have you finally admitted to the embezzlement? But at this hour, shouldn't you be discussing that with your boss?
She muttered, and both my husband and Brittany turned pale. Actually, my husband and Brittany had been embezzling company money. I had heard about it from Michelle when my husband first brought colleagues home. At that time, I had evidence but no concrete proof. So, I had been in contact with Michelle.
Why do you know about this?
I informed the manager that the accounting books didn't add up, and Brittany was the one managing the accounts. When Brittany started pushing her work on me, I noticed something was wrong.
You should have told me at that time.
But I was worried about offending Brittany. I thought if Brittany was doing something illegal, you might cover it up. That's when I consulted the department manager. Michelle stared at my husband with cold eyes, and he fell silent. After all, it wasn't just Brittany who embezzled money. My husband did too. In fact, my husband embezzled first, and Brittany later became an accomplice. Michelle was worried that you were neglecting me at home and told me about the possibility of you embezzling and cheating with Brittany. She even introduced me to a lawyer and suggested I leave soon.
What? So you knew everything the day we were kicked out? That I was embezzling money?
No, at that time it was just suspicious. After that, I checked your checking account and found suspicious deposits and transfers.
What? Did you look at it without permission?
Before Brittany was assigned to your department, a good amount of money was deposited, but after Brittany was assigned, I found out that you were sending Brittany a set amount of money each month.
That's sneaky.
Yeah, that's awful. My life is a mess. My husband and Brittany came to me crying and complained. I was amazed that they could say such things, considering what they had done. Sneaky? Who's the real criminal here? From then on, I had evidence of your affair with Brittany.
That was because I had no choice but to stay at Brittany's house after you kicked me out.
Actually, it was before that. When I kicked you out, the investigation was still ongoing, but I heard from the detective agency that they had already gathered enough evidence. I kicked you out because I didn't want to spend another second with you. I then showed my husband a photo from my bag that I knew was proof of the affair. Even though he was claiming to be working late, he had been spending time with Brittany and even brought her home. How much time did they want to spend together, seriously? At this point, both my husband and Brittany looked utterly defeated, but then Michelle further explained.
So you both confessed to what happened earlier, right? Actually, I have been listening in on your conversation from nearby and reported it to the department head. Now you're both in deep trouble. You'll have a hard time with money since you'll have to repay what you embezzled. But don't worry, you'll definitely pay up for the adultery.
My husband and Brittany left the convenience store in tears. However, realizing that we were being watched by those around us, both Michelle and I felt uncomfortable. I was so focused on getting my husband and Brittany away that I didn't think about what was going on around me. But then people nearby who seemed to have overheard our conversation applauded us. It felt somewhat embarrassing. Afterwards, my husband and Brittany didn't return home and went into hiding, but they were quickly found and arrested. It turns out my husband had embezzled an amount reaching 7 figures over several years, and I was questioned about it as well. However, I felt somewhat relieved knowing that he had spent the embezzled money on his own pleasures, and I hadn't unknowingly used any of it. I might have felt a bit relieved about that. Even if they were to ask me to repay what I've used, it would be troublesome for me. This is what I heard from my parents-in-law. My husband used to think I was on the cute side, but it seems he also wanted to be friendly with attractive women, so he frequented nightclubs. However, when Brittany, who was unexpectedly more beautiful than the girls in the clubs, entered my husband's department, he started to have an attachment to her. Then he should have divorced me and then became friends with Brittany, but I was told a very selfish story that my husband didn't want to let go of me either. My mother-in-law seemed to realize that my husband was entirely at fault, and although she had been on his side all along, but she changed her mind. My parents-in-law politely apologized to me. They handled the divorce with my husband smoothly, so I was able to divorce him safely. I asked my husband and Brittany for alimony. They initially paid back some of the money they owed, then turned to their parents to cover the rest, so now they have no money left to pay me. My in-laws and Brittany's parents managed to gather money with the help of relatives and pay me the entire settlement amount. The amount the parents advanced was said to be repaid over the lifetime of my husband and Brittany. After that, my husband and Brittany received probation due to being first-time offenders, but my husband lost his job abruptly. My husband struggled to find another job and was briefly unemployed. Although he found a job with poor conditions, the work is tough and the pay is low. It seems he's having a hard time making ends meet while repaying debts to his parents, and he's started doing side jobs, facing difficult days. Brittany seems to be in a similar situation as my husband. Initially, he took responsibility and tried to marry Brittany, but Brittany blamed everything on my husband and ended their relationship. I was told that her husband had developed a distrust of women. That's what I heard the last time I saw my in-laws after the divorce. My parents-in-law looked exhausted. It must be tough having a criminal in the family. Am I living peacefully now? I've continued to share a room with Michelle since then. We're incredibly close, like lifelong best friends. Both Michelle and I feel amazed because we've never been so close to anyone before. This is what friendship is all about. Michelle has a strong personality, so she seems to face a lot of challenges at work, but lately she's been thinking about how I would handle things and speaking up.
By doing so, I feel like the atmosphere in the office has relaxed a bit.
She said that, so it seems she's doing her best in her own way. I've been given more responsibilities at work lately, which brings a lot of stress, but looking at Michelle's illustrations soothes me. It feels like I'm really enjoying this new phase of life. Thank you for listening this far. It's surprising that Michelle and I get along so well, isn't it? Friendships like that are really wonderful. I hope Michelle continues to live happily with me from now on. As for my husband and Brittany, who have lost everything, while it would be good if they repent, that's probably quite difficult. People don't change easily. There are still many people who judge others solely by their appearance. Understanding who someone truly is on the inside is important.